This would be so cool if it happens.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome in a Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And of course, we are always free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And folks, this is a mini podcast. We are going to talk about football, actually. And Deion Sanders over at Colorado had an interesting proposal. And trust me, it relates to Syracuse. So let's dive right into it. Colorado football head coach Deion Sanders proposed an interesting idea to the media. I believe it was today. And Coach Sanders said, quote, "I would actually like to play the spring game against another team in the spring." He went on to say, quote, "That's what I'm trying to do right now. I would like to style it like the pros. I'd like to go against someone in practice for a few days, and then you have the spring game. I think the public would be satisfied with that tremendously. I think it's a tremendous idea. I've told those personnel who should understand that it's a tremendous idea." Okay, well, that's just Colorado head coach Deion Sanders saying, we want to play against someone else in a spring game. How does this relate to Syracuse? It would be very easy for me to go on here on a podcast and say, yeah, Syracuse should do it. And by the way, they should do it. But then Syracuse head coach Fran Brown just adds more fuel to the fire because Fran Brown says on social media, he responds, quote, "We will come to Boulder for 3 days." How about that, right? Colorado proposes an idea, and Fran Brown is saying, bring it on. Let's do it. A Syracuse, Colorado spring game. Boy, would that be something. It's important to note that this is just a proposal and I guess an offer from Syracuse. Nothing is finalized yet, but this is an amazing idea. And let me tell you all why I believe it's an amazing idea. Before that, though, comment in the comment section below. I want to hear from you. Would you like to see a Syracuse, Colorado spring game? Let me know in the comment section below. Number one, got more national TV exposure. You know what national TV exposure does? Does a couple of things. Helps your recruiting out. Can't hurt, right, to be on national TV. It also helps donations, which will then lead you to more NIL money to use because you're on national TV. It would be fantastic. And I imagine I'll talk about it later on here on this mini podcast that this would be nationally televised. I don't know if something like this has ever been done before. And you could tell me in the comment section below, have two teams ever gone up against each other in spring games? Let me know. I'm not aware of that ever occurring before in college football. Another reason why I believe this is a great idea is because for Syracuse and Colorado, you get to face competition other than yourself. Let's say this doesn't happen, okay? Colorado has their own spring game. Syracuse has their own spring game. Here's what happens, okay? They will both play against each other and practice against each other between now and August when the actual season starts, and then you play against another team. So basically, it's the same old, same old. You're just going up against your other players on the roster, right? You're splitting the squads up. That's normal. But let's say this does happen. This would be, as Deion Sanders alluded to, kind of like the NFL. Preseason NFL isn't what it once was because starters really don't play in the preseason anymore. But you know what they do in the NFL is they have inter-squad training camp sessions where two squads will meet up during training camp and go up against each other to see where they're at that point in the offseason and see how you stack up against other competition other than your own team, right? And here's the beauty of this. It's Syracuse and Colorado. You don't have to necessarily worry about spilling out your secrets to the other team because Syracuse and Colorado, the only way that they'd be playing each other next season is, well, if they're in a bowl game, or even better, they're matched up against each other in the college football playoff, which we would all certainly be happy about if that occurred. So, more national TV exposure, you face competition other than yourself. And from a Syracuse and Colorado fan perspective, the head coaches. Deion Sanders needs no explanation. We all know Deion Sanders. He's a quote machine. But Fran Brown, if you're a Colorado fan that is stumbling upon this mini podcast, let me let you in on a little secret about Fran Brown, okay? He is fantastic with the media. This is not going to be a war of words. More so, it's going to be a party of words and one-liners that you'll be able to use for the rest of time. Bottom line, this idea, if this were to happen, this would be fantastic. Colorado head coach Deion Sanders, once again, he proposes an intra-squad spring game. And Fran Brown responds on social media saying, we'll come to Boulder for 3 days. I love the idea. I'd love to hear from you in the comments section below. Now, coming up, we'll talk maybe a little bit about the logistics of how this would all work. But also, there is one concern I do have with this idea. So stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. Eating healthy doesn't have to be complicated. With Factor, you get chef-made, dietitian-approved meals that are ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes, so you can fuel your body without the hassle of cooking. Factor meals arrives fresh, never frozen, and with 40 options across 8 dietary preferences each week, you can customize your menu to fit your goals, whether that's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. The Korean Beef Bowl and Creamy Parmesan Chicken are some of my favorites. They taste homemade, but take no effort. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/factorpodcast and use code factorpodcast to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code factorpodcast at factormeals.com/factorpodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. You need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free TradeMaster program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage, and now it's your turn. Join the TradeMaster program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. So how would a Syracuse and Colorado spring game work exactly? Well, let's go over some details that are kind of important to this whole idea, okay? Syracuse has its own spring game on April 12th at 3 p.m. Eastern, and last time I checked, it's not expected to be televised. Colorado also has its spring game on April 19th at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, and that's going to be on national television. That's going to be on ESPN. I imagine that if Syracuse and Colorado actually got together and said, we want to do this, that they would play this game on April 19th on ESPN. So it would be Colorado's spring game. Also, I don't know exactly what it would do to Syracuse's own spring game, because if the Orange wanted to, they could play 2 spring games if they really wanted to, because Syracuse plays on April 12th. You can make that game not open to the public or whatever you want to do with it, but you could play that game on April 12th and then fly to Colorado for 3 days, have a couple of practices, and then have a spring game against Colorado if you so choose. My guess, Syracuse probably would just cancel the game altogether on April 12th, but it is something that could occur. So those are a little bit of the logistics of it. We'll get to the concern in just a moment. I'm not concerned about the travel to the West Coast. I'm not concerned about the logistics and hotels and everything like that. That's for people that are much higher up than me running the football program. Those can all be sorted out, even though it is kind of a short notice. So you have a little bit of a month to make this thing happen. But I'm not worried about those things specifically. The one concern I do have with this proposal, and once again, it's an amazing proposal, but I do want to try to see this from both sides here, is the spring portal window. Are you concerned about it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below, because the spring transfer portal window opens on April 16th and it runs until April 25th. So right in the heart of the spring portal window is the spring game proposal between Syracuse and Colorado. Could that game and could those practices leading up to it be a breeding ground for both sides to potentially poach players? Yes, that could happen. Being on national television, could it be a potential breeding ground for outside programs to get a look at your team and potentially poach players away in the spring portal window? Again, the answer is yes, that could happen. There's a reason, and I'm just going to throw 2 stools off the top of my head here, like Nebraska and Georgia are deciding to do non-televised spring games, or in some cases, cancel the spring games altogether. The transfer portal is a real thing. Tampering, even though it's not technically allowed, is a real thing. And so you're trying to limit eyeballs. It sounds counterintuitive. Usually you want all the spotlight on your program because that draws more money, but also you want to win. And winning leads to more money too, and more national television as well. You kind of want to keep your players that are already there. And by putting yourself on national TV, doing this scrimmage, it'd be great, but you do run the risk of the spring portal window kind of having a little wrench in this whole thing. That's my one concern about it. I think there are a lot more pros than there are cons, because I really only see one con, but I'd love to hear from you, your thoughts on a potential Syracuse and Colorado spring game in the comments section below. As far as what is coming up on Locked On Syracuse in the future, tomorrow we will do part 2 of reacting to everything that Adrian Autry said in his final press conference of the season. Oh, he got spicy in part 2, so you're going to want to check that part out when it's out. My gut is that it'll be tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern, but if I record it early in the morning, then perhaps I will record it sometime, or I'll post it sometime around noon. I will let you all know at LO_Syracuse and on YouTube in the community section when that podcast will be posted. Wednesday, we'll talk about questions for Syracuse basketball that they need to answer this offseason. And Thursday, we'll talk about one of those questions, which is biggest offseason needs. All right, so that's coming up next here on Locked On Syracuse. And thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. For your second listen, you can check out the Locked On College Basketball Podcast with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. March is here, so be the most informed college basketball fan throughout the madness. You can find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe. Tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse so this channel can grow and reach all Syracuse Orange fans. And also tell all your friends about a potential Syracuse and Colorado spring game. I'd love to hear from you in the comments section below. And I will see you all again soon.